Welcome to the Emerson Polling Report. I'm Lauren Granada, joined by Emerson Polling Director and Professor Spencer Kimball. Hi, Spencer.
Hi, Lauren.
So we're looking at two states today, Nevada and Michigan, but I want to look at Nevada first. So let's look at the Democratic Caucus poll. Tell me the change we've seen from March until now.
Well, Nevada is an interesting state in that it's a caucus state. And what we've seen in Nevada, basically in 2020, is what we've seen in other states, where Elizabeth Warren was kind of middle of the pack at 10% back in March. Now she's really shot up into the second place. We've watched Bernie Sanders kind of slip a little bit in Nevada. But remember, Sanders is really strong with Hispanic voters. In fact, a report just came out that he is leading amongst all candidates in getting donations from Hispanics. Another study just came out in Florida where he's leading amongst Hispanics. And even though Nevada is only about 26, 27% minority, the Hispanic group will be a larger impact in that primary, so we expect to see some rallying there. I think probably the best news outside of Warren's information for a candidate would be Joe Biden, who has seen his lead increase slightly while he's obviously been under a lot of attack. Now, Nevada is also interesting in that they are the third state in the process, and they became the third state in 2008 because Harry Reid wanted to rebuild the state as a Democratic stronghold, and he's kind of done so. They now have 3 out of the 4 congressional seats, but as we take a look at that general election, you can see Nevada is still very much in play when we look at 2020.
And why is Bernie appealing so much to the Hispanic population?
Well, he really appeals to younger voters, and the Hispanic population is naturally a younger constituency. As they're growing in our country, they've been now the second or the largest minority group over African Americans. They made that turn a couple years ago. They continue to grow to nearly 20% of the population, and it's a younger group that's growing. And that younger group, generally speaking, is with Bernie Sanders. We see that with the white voters, we see that with African American voters, and that would explain to me why the Hispanic group is in his camp. But remember, he was unable to win the caucus in 2016. In fact, Clinton, since we've had this new system since 2008, has won both caucuses. So somebody new will have to win in 2020, presuming she doesn't jump into the race.
And as you said, and even just looking at the poll, Biden is doing very well. But why is it important for him to maintain his support in Nevada?
Well, we've seen in other polls, like in Iowa, he's very competitive and historically has not run well in Iowa. He came in 4th in 2008, basically had to drop out. And if he's unable to, if Mayor Pete or if Elizabeth Warren or if Bernie Sanders or some other candidate is able to win Iowa, and then New Hampshire is a problem for Biden because you have 2 New England candidates running who are going to perform better than their national numbers in both Sanders and Warren as neighboring states. So he's got an issue over there. And as the front runner, you can't take too many losses and still be the front runner. And that's why Nevada is the third state. After Nevada, we jump over to South Carolina, and then we go right into Super Tuesday, where over 1/3 of the delegates for the entire nomination process is at stake. So he's got to really make sure that he's able to get some momentum. If he's unable to it's basically a jump start of the campaign if he comes out of the gate slowly in Iowa and New Hampshire.
And you mentioned the possibility of another candidate winning in Iowa. What are those chances?
Slim, but because we're getting into November. And so right now we basically have 4 candidates. We've seen Kamala Harris really drop. She was a candidate that at one point had lifted herself in Iowa into real contention. But basically we've watched her slip about 12, 13 points over these 6 months out there. And it'll be difficult for somebody to get that traction under the radar, especially in Iowa. But it appears Mayor Pete is definitely in the run, and we'll have to obviously see who gets those. Normally 3 folks get what we say punch of tickets in New Hampshire. We'll see if maybe 4 get out of Iowa this year.
And I want to look at the head-to-heads poll now. Can you tell me what we're seeing here?
In Nevada, in the head-to-head races, is probably President Trump's best opportunity for a pickup state. Obviously, he's going to be defending Michigan and Wisconsin. He's going to be defending Pennsylvania. And he was very competitive as well in New Hampshire in 2016. He lost that one by 3,000 votes. But Nevada was a state that he lost by 2-3 points. And right now, he's polling fairly even, if not ahead by a point or two. And there's a lot of demographics in Nevada. Obviously, Las Vegas, you have a lot of rural area of the state. And it will be interesting to see if he's able to capture that state or at least make it competitive where the Democrats will have to compete. But on the flip side, he's got that same issue down in Arizona. He should be dominating down in a more conservative region, but he's seeing himself having trouble. So I expect to see him campaigning a lot out west and trying to hold Arizona and try to extend himself in Nevada.
And in your analysis, you described Democrats and their divide about who could change their mind and vote for someone else. Can you talk more about that?
So we're looking at loyalty of supporters. And what we saw in 2016 was the Trump supporter, even though early on in the process, at this point he was around 25%, but we were seeing like 80% of his supporters at the time were like, I'm sticking with him. And that's why as he continued to grow in momentum of his campaign, his support was really strong. When on the Democratic side, we see Bernie and Biden with very strong supporters. But Warren, on the other hand, is like half. So Bernie and Biden, about 60% of their voters say I'm sticking with Bernie and Biden. About 30% say I'm sticking with Warren. So to me, Warren is kind of now the fresh face. She is the person that they're taking a look at. And she's got to make the case to the voters to stick with her as they're looking at other candidates as well. So the question will be, is this a temporary rise in the polls for Warren, or is this something she'll be able to sustain? And we'll see that in that type of loyalty question.
And now let's talk about healthcare policy. What's it looking like in Nevada?
Well, in Arizona, as we talked about last week, we saw that voters really were not excited about Medicare for all. In Nevada, it's slightly different. Now, Nevada's healthcare system is not the best in the country. In fact, their educational system needs a lot of support. So they have a lot of social programs that are at issue there, which makes it a different state. But primarily, they're just not happy with Obamacare. They want either the public option or they want Medicare for all. And this is where the Democrats have to kind of figure out where they're going to go as a party. Are they going to go to the Medicare for all, which is more of a minority issue support, but there is support for it in 35%, which is something. There would be more support for the public option, more likely, but we'll have to see who the Democrats nominate, as Warren and Bernie have left, to the Medicare for all, while Biden and Buttigieg seems to be more for that public option, and that will be like an underlying theme of this campaign regarding healthcare, because healthcare is the second most important issue in Nevada. And it's very impactful, so people will be talking about it.
And you had also mentioned something about Nevada voters thinking that other states should be like Nevada. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so we just threw in a question asking, should other states be like Nevada or should Nevada be like other states? We asked the same thing in Michigan, and what was interesting was we got different results. In Nevada, people thought about 60% wanted people to be like Nevada. What does that mean? I'm not exactly sure. Do they want gambling? Do they want certain type of lifestyles? But on the flip side, what we see in Michigan, and we'll talk about that in a moment, was more of a split where they weren't quite sure if they should be the role model for the rest of the country or should be looking at the rest of the country to mimic them.
Well, let's switch gears to Michigan. I want to look at the Democratic primary poll. Biden is in the lead over here too, but Sanders is coming in second. Why?
Well, because of that youth vote. And in Michigan, what's so exciting is that if we remember in 2016, there was all of the polling showing Bernie losing by 15, 20 points. He ends up winning the state by 2 points and really gives himself a jolt of adrenaline in that campaign and keeps that campaign alive. Michigan's an interesting state. In 2008 goes for Romney. It sometimes bucks the trend of where the other states are going, and it gives sometimes an outside campaign an opportunity to make an inroad that others aren't expecting. So I think what we've seen is potentially a little bit of a sympathy bump for Sanders after his heart attack, his debate performance. He may have been able to rally a bit of a crew, and we've seen that in that Michigan number where his has gone up. Biden, despite all of the criticism and attacks that he's been receiving, he was able to hold his lead, but we've seen it drop about 4 points. And Warren, again, has been able to bring herself into the conversation in Michigan as a state that she'll be able to compete in.
And have we seen any of these candidates sort of address Michigan specifically with the Flint crisis?
It's a great question because we asked about Flint. And voters, Voters are not happy in Flint, Michigan. Like we were able to, you can regionally look at where support is for different people based on Detroit, Flint. We could look up in the northern part of the state, the southwestern part of the state. And what we see in Flint are people are not happy with Trump, and they're not happy with Gretchen Whitmer, who I thought was a very popular Democratic governor. She just came in 2018, won by like 9 points. But in Flint, they're just not happy. And what they're not happy about is they don't feel like things have really been done for the water issue. They really want to see people prosecuted and be punished for their lack of effort in that issue. 6 out of 7 people want somebody to go to jail. And without that type of response by the government, I think those folks are upset, and we might see that come out in the election with people not coming out to vote, saying, what does it matter? We have a Democratic governor, we have Republican, no one's doing anything to make this issue whole for us. And so that's what we'll be looking at with that. We expect candidates to come in and start talking more about that issue because obviously Michigan and their 16 electoral votes could be a decisive amount come November 3rd, 2020.
And now let's look to the head-to-heads poll. This is the first head-to-heads poll that we've seen that's different from most of them. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, we see a lot of momentum for the Democrats in Michigan. We get to look at a lot of different data sets, and what we see is that Bernie Sanders actually performs the best, I think about by 14 points. Joe Biden performs very well at 12, and Elizabeth Warren performs well, but it drops to about 6-7 points. And the question is, would a Warren campaign tighten this race and make it even more competitive versus a Biden or Sanders? Now, in these head-to-heads, we're expecting to see the Democrats doing slightly better because there's more people out there communicating about what's wrong with Trump as opposed to just a one-on-one matchup that we'll see in the fall. So we expect to see some more attacks on Trump and Trump unable to respond to everybody. Remember, you've got, I think, 17 candidates left in the field. They're going around the country telling them why they should be elected and why they shouldn't be voting for Trump. Trump's really only has himself. You know, he's in Kentucky and it's just himself, and he brings in, but he's got to do his own rallies at that point. So we'll see if there's going to be some movement in the fall. But right now, I would be excited to be a Democrat seeing where we are in the head-to-head matchups. On the flip side, we looked at that Senate race with John James against Gary Peters. John James ran against Debbie Stabenow, incumbent. Now, Gary Peters is a very strong senator because he's the only Democrat to win in 2014. That was a Republican wave year. He was the only freshman senator to come in on the Democratic side. So you can see he's a good campaigner, but he's only up 6 points. And as an incumbent, around 45-46%, you get concerned that you're now vulnerable. And if we can see a late swing like we did in 2016, you know, the Democrats are going to have to keep an eye potentially on that race.
Thank you so much, Spencer.
Well, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much for watching the Emerson Polling Report. We'll see you next week.